relationship counselor, Elizabeth Overstreet. Everyone has this vision in their mind of what marriage is, how romantic they want it to be, how they're going to raise their children, you know, what the core values are going to be in that relationship. But often we don't tell each other totally what that vision is.
There have been individuals where you may have met, I don't know, for the first time, and maybe you guys went on a few dates, 2 or 3, several, and you know, whether that was over a span of 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months, and you start to see the attachment. Now, a lot of people will be flattered by that in the initial stage. Oh man, he's all over me. He's pressuring me to go with him to Cancun. And Elizabeth talked about this with some people that she knows. And yes, I hear what you're saying. That can be a red flag because you're already talking about chemistry when in actuality, the compatibility, you hadn't even given it enough time to determine if you are compatible.
Exactly. You don't even really actually truly know that person. You're still not only in the honeymoon phase, but you're still so early on that you don't even know if you can trust this person to go to Cancun or to go. And oftentimes when you talk to people, once the relationship starts to end, they'll tell you and they'll open up about how problematic a lot of those trips are whenever they go too quickly. And am I saying not to enjoy trips and road trips and things like that? No, but I am encouraging people to slow down, because oftentimes those are the things that people are getting attached to. They're getting attached to this dream and this pedestal and this vision of what this person possibly could be. And what happens is that, and one of the things I work with people after the relationship is over, is that we'll actually go back to the beginning stages during this whole chemistry thing, and not in a way of victim blaming, but in a way of victim empowering. I ask them, and everyone always is able to pinpoint a moment. There was something, as great as everything was, there's always something internally said, you need to walk away from this. And you didn't listen to yourself. And oftentimes it's always something they didn't tell anyone. They just assumed that this person was not going to do that again because they had this person on a pedestal. It could have been a slap. It could have been they found that this person was still with somebody else. It could have been road rage. It could have been, but something says like, this is awful. You need to get away from this person. But because of the Cancun trips and because of the love bombing, because the whining and dining, and because of all that, they just assume that they still see the good in them. They just assume that they can work things out to get it back to
which in actuality are addictions when you think about it. Not in a bad way. I mean, who doesn't want to go on some excursion to Europe or to be wined and dined? So I'm starting to see the correlation now with with those examples you're giving.
Yeah. And so what we have to. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. And what I was going to say is, I think the theme you're saying is anything in extreme measures, anything that disrupts, sudden
extreme highs and extreme lows. Yeah, extreme highs and extreme
to like what you're doing on a regular basis, where you feel like you have to maintain it. Because I think a lot of us have been there in relationships where we're like, oh, this person's so great, to your point, because maybe they came so strong and it was just like overwhelming. But then in looking back after you're out of it, you're like, wait, I was putting in so much, losing so much, but you cannot see it in the moment because the emotions are almost crippling, which the brain does something. I mean, there's dopamine, oxytocin hits. I mean, there's a chemical response that's happening in us that makes it easy, hard to detach or see it for what it is. But
you try to stop people from, it sounds like you really try to coach people to take, just slow down just a little bit. Just, see everything for what it's worth first. I know Elizabeth does the same similar thing, when something sounds almost too good to be true. You just met her or you just met him. And so I'm hearing that, amongst both of you with your professions.
Yeah, because what people have to realize is that everybody has red flags. Everybody does. And so if you're in this situation, everybody has red flags. All three of us everyone who's listening has red flags. So when people get into a situation and I start hearing things like, this person has no red flags, and you just hear them on a pedestal, this person is my soulmate, and it's only been, a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, it's typically, there's an issue. And what I tell people is that if there are no red flags, you either A, don't know this person very well, or B, you're moving too quickly and you're not seeing what the real actual red flags, or you're flat out just in denial about what they actually are.
Throw in the C. I thought you were just going to throw in the C. You know, they're hiding something. But no.
Yeah, they could be hiding something too. Yep. So when you slow down, what happens is that you're actually able to see this person for who they actually are, and you're able to determine, you know, are these red flags that I do see, are they deal breakers, or are they something that's more negotiable?
Yeah, I think the challenge now is like everyone is learning the terminology, which is amazing. But I'm sure this like gets to you like it gets to me, but sometimes the terminology gets misused or misunderstood. So like one thing I want to talk to you about is narcissism, because like narcissism is a term that people learned of as of late, you know, the last, I'd say 3-4 years that you hear it more and more pronounced. And sometimes I think people misunderstand or misuse the terminology. So I noticed that you do a lot around narcissistic abusive cycles. So can you break down for our listeners, like what that looks like, you know, to be with someone that's a narcissist?
And also as a parent too, if you don't mind, because you mentioned that earlier, and I didn't get a chance to ask you, what is a narcissistic parent? So like Elizabeth is asking on the dating end, I'm curious on both ends.
Yeah. So when we're talking about someone who's narcissistic, we're now crossing over from what would be problematic, toxic behavior to someone who is also controlling and abusive, makes everything all about them. And the reason why I talk about, and you're going to notice that there's going to be a change in my content because of what you mentioned, it becoming more problematic. I'm going to be not talking as much about narcissism for multiple reasons, which I'll get into here in a second. But a narcissist has this need to control all aspects of the other person. They don't think of you as, and I know when I mention control, a lot of people are, well, I like control too, but this is to a point where when they don't get their way, they have the ability to become abusive, whether it be psychological, mental, and they want to, or physical, and they want ultimate control. So going back to what we were just talking about of a relationship moving too quickly, a narcissist will intentionally get you pregnant or intentionally have a baby with you or buy a house. And all these things sound great on the surface until you're actually in the relationship. Now you can't leave. Now this person who you thought was going to be able to take care of you financially or took over your finances if you were the one that was the breadwinner. Oftentimes people think that it's only the people who are the breadwinners and the stay-at-home moms who are the victim. It could be the other way around, where the stay-at-home mom is controlling all the finances because she's the one that is managing all the money. And then they're making threats that if you were to ever leave, if you're ever to do this, and it could be something over something simple. And so what happens is that this causes, going back to what we're talking about with the addiction, it causes a lot of PTSD and a lot of you feel like this person has ultimate control over you, over your life. You think and keep in mind, you've had this person on their pedestal because of those beginning stages. And so now what happens is that now there's a trauma bond that even though you may not admit it, you may not tell your friends, you may not tell your family, that this relationship is problematic. It's controlling, it's abusive, but you also don't know what to do about it because a part of you thinks that the relationship can change back for the better, but you also internally know that this relationship ultimately is now chaotic and is now you're now in a narcissistic abuse cycle.
And you talked about this trauma bonding, which that happens probably more than what people think, right? But how do people break out of a trauma bonding situation? Because sometimes maybe they don't have the resources they feel, right? They're really stuck. They are in a situation where maybe that person's the breadwinner, they're controlling the finances, and they really have let their lives go in a way, right, to accommodate this relationship. How do you coach people through or counsel them through how they can still kind of find their footing? Because I think sometimes people feel helpless, like they know they're in a destitute situation. They can see that it's not a great situation, but they can't see their way out of it. And
it's a level of dependency,
There is. So that was something I talk about a lot, is the dependency that we have on this person. And, because if one person is a narcissist, the likelihood is that the other person is codependent, and it's called a codependent narcissistic dance. Oftentimes, and this is a lot of the reason, going back to what I was talking about, why I'm not talking about narcissism as much. I'm still going to provide the services. But the problem is that what you're starting to see on social media and online is that people are all pointing fingers at the narcissist, problematic and as abusive as they are. And there's no doubt that we have to understand that it's the narcissistic codependent dance.